Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. This is the Wednesday, November 15th edition of the Carolina Weather Group. Tonight, we have on two great guests. We have Diana Thomas, meteorologist for the North Carolina Emergency Management, and Johnny Q, from the National Weather Service in Columbia, South Carolina. Very happy to have John and Diana on with us tonight and look forward to hearing their expertise on not only how the state prepares, but how the Weather Service and the state kind of do things hand in hand, making sure that you and your family are prepared whenever adverse or severe weather affects your area. So looking forward to that. A few housekeeping rules before we do get started. We are live on several platforms: Facebook Live, Periscope, YouTube Live, our Google Hangouts. So there's many ways that you can watch us, or if you're listening to us on the podcast as well. So, or later on. If you have any questions tonight while you're watching live, feel free to send them our way. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook. Twitter is probably the best way, Carolina WX Group, or you can drop a comment on the Facebook Live, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the night. And we'll let our guests give out their social media accounts or how you best can get a hold of them if you are listening to the podcast later on. So that is the housekeeping rules. This is show 206, so we're well over our 200 mark, and looking forward to this great show tonight. But before we do that, let's quickly go around the weather desk here and bring in some of our panelists and kind of talk about what's going on in our area. I guess, Ricky, you're the closest to any weather action today. It's like a front's moving through your neck of the woods.
Yeah, we had some light rain showers this evening, nothing too heavy. I actually stood outside in the majority of the front talking to one of my neighbors and didn't get too wet. So just a little minor front, getting a little bit of rain today. We're more looking ahead to Saturday with that stronger cold front coming in. And, of course, next week with Thanksgiving, some models flip-flopping a little bit on their solutions, but we'll keep an eye on that. You know, as you well know, up in the mountains here of Tennessee and Northwest North Carolina and Virginia, we're always looking for northwest flow snow after a frontal passage, and it looks like Saturday night to Sunday maybe we'll get a little bit of that.
Yeah, it is the season of that, and also some gusty winds with that front moving through. So that'll probably be the story here in the Western Carolinas and East Tennessee. Let's go down to the coastal area of South Carolina. Let's bring in Jared Smith, who is in Charleston tonight. Jared, is it warm and balmy, or is it kind of cool down there like it is up here?
Oh, it's nice and cool. It's got only to 61 today, so that's about 9 degrees below normal, usually around 70 this time of year. We stay a little cool into the weekend, and then just ahead of that cold front, we surge briefly back in the mid-70s, and then back down into the 60s. Haven't had that first frost or freeze yet, though, so that's always nice. But yeah, legitimate sweater weather continues. I'm not complaining. I've had my first complaint on Twitter, so, that's one of, still a vastly positive response. Come talk to me in January, and we'll let you know how we feel about it then. But for now, it's feeling very much like how it's supposed to, Scotty.
Sounds good. And for you, and I'll mention here, our buddy Shay Gibson is off tonight. He's speaking with the College of Charleston sailing team, so that's why Shay's not with us tonight. But Jared, we're counting down the final weeks of the tropics, and it looks like it's kind of quiet for your area.
And thank goodness for that. 15 days and counting, not that I am counting. Very glad to be getting a break, getting some time to regroup and rejuvenate, and not have to worry about too much more tropical action. Very much excited about getting into some, much rather have wedges of the high-pressure kind versus the alternative that we saw earlier in October. So.
I agree with that. I wholeheartely agree with that. So let's go to Charlotte, North Carolina. We'll bring in our buddy James Barton. James, how's the weather in the Queen City tonight?
You know, it's not too bad, Scotty. I like when the sun is out. I can deal with the cold, but when we're in those wedges and we've got the clouds, that's when I think I need the extra cup of coffee to make it through the day. So things are holding out just fine. 42 degrees here in Charlotte, in case you couldn't tell, or if you're looking for your local temperature. It's at the bottom of our screen. Shout out to Jared for putting the finishing touches on our Carolina Weather Group prototype ticker, and I thanked him by forgetting to chroma key him. So, Jared, I'm sorry, but next time we come to you, I promise you won't be sitting in front of the green monster. Scotty?
That's okay.
I do have to give Jared and James some props. They have been working tirelessly, it seems like, the past couple of nights working on this new graphics project. So, gentlemen, thank you from Ricky and I. We appreciate it. So keep on keeping on. So let's bring in our guests tonight. We'll bring in Diana and John. Diana, we'll start with you. Work for the North Carolina Emergency Management as a meteorologist. Welcome to our show, and kind of talk to us about you, introduce us to you, and maybe your career path up to your current job.
Okay. Thank you for having me, guys. As you said, my name's Diana Thomas. I'm here in Raleigh working for North Carolina Emergency Management. I started in Raleigh quite a few years ago, where I got my undergrad at North Carolina State University in meteorology. I continued on in education, where I obtained my master's up at State University of New York in Albany. And right out of getting that, I got a job in wind energy, where I worked for a few years. And then my husband and I decided to move back home to North Carolina, where I got a job in air quality, and then worked there for a few years and landed myself in emergency management in Raleigh.
I guess I need to unmute myself first. But Diana, thank you for that introduction.
Yeah.
Let's go down to Columbia, South Carolina. John will bring you in. Warning coordinator meteorologist in the National Weather Service office there in Columbia. Welcome, John. I think this is your first time on the show as well.
It is. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We always follow you. So kind of tell us about you, John, to our followers who may not know you, your career up to where you are right now in Columbia.
Sure. I got my bachelor's degree in Stony Brook University up on Long Island. And I was fortunate enough to get in the Weather Service shortly after graduating. And started my career in the Philadelphia Mount Holly office up in New Jersey. Great experience there. I was able to go down as a forecaster to Wilmington, North Carolina. I spent 9 years in Charleston, South Carolina as a lead forecaster. Now I've been in the Columbia office since April of last year as a warning coordination meteorologist. And so I've had a lot of great experiences throughout my career and really feel pretty fortunate to move around to so many good offices.
I was going to say, and it's been quite the past few years for you guys in the Columbia office. We'll dive into that a little bit later on, but we'll start the conversation here. Ricky and I are going to tag team it. So my first question for you guys is, when you're looking at the weather models, Diana and John, before we see the storm hit, we normally have several days to prepare about that. So kind of first tell us about what your job is, what you do, Diana, for the emergency management. And then, John, I'll let you kind of talk about what your warning coordinator meteorologist job is in the office. And then we'll kind of build the platform and move from there. So, Diana, I'll give it to you first.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, we are really the bridge between the Weather Service or the Hurricane Center in the event of a hurricane and the public. So we basically analyze the data that's available and the products that the Weather Service provides for us, and we generate those into easy to read, easy to digest graphics and bullet points, really. And so we take that information and we send it out via email. We provide in-person briefings. We are available to the director and senior staff at all times, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If they have any kind of questions for any kind of event upcoming, they have availability to us. And then, so in terms of weather models, we actually do look at those. We guide them as some of a guide. We don't, make our own forecast. We're mandated to use the Weather Service, but we use them as a guide to the potential outcomes. So like our outliers and any kind of extremes that may or may come our way. So we use that to help keep everyone safe and make the best decisions possible and keep every avenue available.
So Diana and John as well, I want to bring you both into this question, because with some of the floods we've seen in past years, some of the tropical storms, we've often seen one point of contact referred to at the state level. How do you at emergency management get your information out? And then John, at a National Weather Service level, we've sometimes seen in South Carolina, I remember especially with the floods, how there was almost one main office point of contact, correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of worked together. How do you guys go about working with multiple offices across the state?
Do you want to? Well, for us, we have points of contact at every office around the state, and We also get on chat where if we want to ask any kind of questions, we have an open line of communication with all offices. We can call, we can email. We have a spot in our emergency operations center for any weather service personnel to come. We've actually had weather service people. We had Nick Petro attend the press conference that the governor put on for Hurricane Irma. So we really have a great dynamic between all of the offices and in North Carolina Emergency Management. And in terms of a point of contact, we really have our public information officers, and they really output any kind of extreme outreach where we want to reach all of the public. We put things on Facebook, Twitter, any kind of social media, they'll push that out. But if we're in terms of making decisions for emergency managers, we have our area coordinators, our county emergency managers, and we call them, we send out email with any kind of information they need through that, and we hold briefings over the phone. We have conference calls. Anything that they really need from us, they'll ask us, and we'll put that on for them.
Yeah, Diana got exactly right. I mean, in terms of the weather service being point of contact, I mean, as a warning coordination meteorologist, my everyday job is pretty much being the primary contact or liaison between the weather service and our external partners, whether it be emergency managers, the media, schools, anyone else that we have to interact with on a daily basis. And then certainly when there's hazardous weather that comes in, the role kind of transitions to making sure that the partners are getting the services that they need, getting weather updates as frequently as possible. So all of my emergency managers have my cell phone number, can reach me or any other managers at my office anytime. Generally encourage them to call the forecast staff and operations if they have just a general weather-related question, because I trust my forecasters to be watching the weather and be able to provide really useful information. But when it really comes down to coordinating big events, the warning coordination meteorologist in most offices are the primary contact. And then, of course, once we're in the event itself, there's a lot of coordination going on internally within the weather service. The key is to make sure we're giving a consistent message. What you hear from one office is consistent with what you hear from another office, and really trying to make it simple for emergency managers and people just like Diana who need to take all this information from various offices and get something useful out of it that they can use to make key decisions.
What are the most challenging events to kind of coordinate everything on, or is there an event that often gets more publicity or is talked about more?
I think for us, the tropical events have the most coordination. We see it coming days, weeks, like 7-10 days out. People are already starting to watch the models and see things come in. We have usually a lot of heads up unless something forms right off the coast. So, the process for a tropical system, the coordination, looking at the model start really well in advance. Certainly it's going to be the case with a winter storm or severe weather outbreak, but you're probably not looking 7 days out for that. We're probably more looking within a 2 to 3 day time frame for those kind of events. So it really depends on the event. I think for us, though, it's the tropical events that allow us the time to get all the preparations in place, to brief the partners, and really start watching models, every day and watching how they're shifting with track and what potential impacts we might expect.
How often are those updates sent out to EMs and things like that? Or how often do you guys, Diana, then disseminate that to your state officials?
Well, we try not to inundate everyone with every update that we have. And with tropical weather, we have more regular updates. And with the winter, it's kind of an as-needed basis. So we really just try to pass along pertinent information for the decision-making process. So that's kind of a judgment call, and there's not really a set time frame, really, especially in the winter events.
And so what are some of the primary products that EMs like to get? I know a lot of EMs are maybe more well-versed in weather information, some not as well-versed in weather information. Are there things that they really like to have from the weather service or from you guys?
Well, absolutely. There are a lot of things that emergency managers really want from us. They really are concerned with the primary threats that any kind of event is going to give to them. They want to know the impacts to their area. They want to know what kind of heads up they need to give to their public. They need to know the specific locations. Like, we deal with North Carolina as a whole, So we need to be specific. Are we dealing with the more western kind of event, or a central or a coastal kind of event? They're also, they need timing. They need to know if it's going to be a night event or if it's during the day and that kind of thing. And they finally want to know the confidence that the Weather Service has in their forecast that they're putting out. They want to know if it's going to be, you know, pretty confident that we're going to have a pretty substantial event that day, or if there's some leeway in what could actually happen. So that's really what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think it's really a great point, and I think the Weather Service is continuing to learn what our partners in emergency management really need in terms of products. For example, in Columbia now, we're considered a state liaison office since we're in the capital, so we're responsible for making sure that the state gets the services and products that it needs. But one thing we need to do at a state level is create graphics that the state can use. So not just for our local forecast area. So for Columbia, it would just be the Midlands of South Carolina, for example. But we need something that's useful on a state level. So that involves coordinating with the other offices that serve the state and creating graphics with all of our forecasts to really give detailed information. Talking about impacts, talking about timing, things that Diana just discussed are really important. So I think you look back 10, 15 years ago or more, when I got in the Weather Service, we used to put information out. It used to be an old zone forecast or a forecast discussion, and people had to figure it out for themselves. And I think we've really started to transition here in the past 5 to 10 years to interpreting our forecast and making it a more useful manner for our partners to make decisions off of.
And John, that's a great point, what you and Diana was just talking about. You know, we live in the Carolinas, very adverse weather here. You know, our western part of the state could be dealing with winter weather, while the eastern part of the states could be dealing with severe weather. So does that, how much of a strain does that put on you guys in the offices there, trying to prepare maybe your western areas for the possibility of some snow or sleet, and your easternmost coastal portions in North and South Carolina for severe weather?
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of having the local office structure like we do. Some people might say, well, you have 4 offices, for example, in South Carolina covering the state, and is that really needed? But that's the benefit of having these local offices and the local experts. So, for example, we have a snow event in the upstate. The Greenville-Spartanburg office can really focus on that and be briefing their partners on that threat, where if you have a severe threat now down along the coast on the same day, the Charleston office can be briefing their partners on the severe potential. And then in Columbia, we could kind of give a broad picture to the state emergency management as to what to expect, but the local offices really could be the expert in their area and make sure their local partners, whether it be emergency managers or anyone else, gets the information that they really need.
And just to add to that on the EM side, sorry to cut you off, we will send out information on a state, kind of statewide, and we can get our area email addresses or phone numbers and send out kind of location sensitive or specific emails. So like if we have a Western Branch event, we can contact all of them and give them specifics on what's coming their way, and then conversely do it for the coastal region. So we can give a broad sense to everyone statewide, and then kind of hone in on what we need to tell certain people and not inundate with their inboxes with information that's not pertinent to their activities.
So yeah, going back a little bit to talking about the statewide coordination, I know one thing that has been a real very helpful thing in the last couple, you know, with the 2016 Matthew and 2017 Irma, is having John up there, at least from my perspective in South Carolina, having John up there next to the governor giving the weather briefing, so it's not being distilled. John, can you talk a little bit about how that came about? Because I feel like that hasn't always been the way it's been when we have these statewide events.
Yeah, sure. So about the time I started in the Columbia office, actually almost the entire management staff had retired within the past year. So there's really no management staff. So we had a whole new management staff come in, and we really made it a priority to make sure we were supporting our emergency managers during these events, going on site and making sure our forecasters were prepared to do the same. And there was a lot of work that went on in the background. We've the key is always building these relationships with our partners, working with them ahead of time, getting to know each other. That's really critical, building that trust. But we also had to coordinate between all the offices. And I have to say we have some great offices serving the Carolinas, and especially here in South Carolina. We have meetings with all the management staff. we're all on the same page. Our goal is not to compete against the other office. It's to make sure we're getting the best information out there. So by building those relationships, we were invited in, just like North Carolina, says they have Nick Petro show up from the Raleigh office. South Carolina said, hey, you always have a seat at the table here if you want to come in. And we took them up on that. And I think most people find that once the Weather Service is there on site providing support, it's a service they really can't do without in the future, because that face-to-face communication during a hazardous weather event is ideal. Going through our remote briefings, you just don't get the same effect, but being there with the people making the decisions and aiding them is really critical. So once we got in there, I mean, I really appreciate what South Carolina Emergency Management has done, allowing us to come in there, and they saw the benefit, and we started briefing the governor, and they had asked us to go into the press conferences, and that's really a big thing, like you had mentioned, Jared, because sometimes a politician isn't a meteorologist, and you can't expect them to know the weather. It's just not what they're supposed to be doing. And you always find that, they'll get something wrong, or and you can't blame them. But when they're getting the information from the Weather Service, or it's a meteorologist that's actually briefing the weather information, I think you lose some of that potential for miscommunication. When you're talking about things like hurricanes and evacuations, the last thing you want is mixed messages out there. So really, it's just been a tremendous team effort, especially down here in South Carolina, between all the weather forecast offices and state emergency management.
I want to jump back just a moment, if we can, and talk about uncertainty. We had discussed, how some of these outlooks are sent out, but one of the things I think has really been upped in communication over the past couple of years has been our conversation of uncertainty. John, how do you guys convey the uncertainty to the EMs? And then Diana, how do you guys then get that message out to your partners?
Yeah, I think we've explored with different ways, and sometimes that's a really difficult thing to explain the uncertainty to somebody. Is it, because sometimes if the event happens, it could be a really bad event. I'm confident that if the hurricane comes here, it's going to be very bad, but I'm not sure, is it going to track here? Or the winter storm, if the cold air gets in and we get enough snow, it's going to be a major event for us. But if the timing's just off of this, storm tracks to the west 50 miles, we may not see anything. So it's always a little tricky to describe uncertainty to people, but we try to do it multiple ways. We try to do it graphically, kind of show the potential impact and then the confidence. So that's one way that we'll do it. But of course, that has to be factored in. And when you're looking, and Diana probably could speak to this better than I could, but for tropical, and you're talking about coastal evacuations, decisions have to be made days before potential landfall. In fact, in South Carolina, most of the time, the decision to evacuate the coast has to be done the day before any kind of tropical storm or hurricane watches are even issued. So, you're still at that point where there's plenty of uncertainty in the forecast, yet these critical decisions that cost millions of dollars, potentially disrupt people's lives, all have to be made days in advance. So it's really just, I think we're fortunate because our emergency management partners understand the weather pretty good, and they know what's going on. So when we try to explain that we're watching this, if it goes this way, this might happen, don't focus on just that single line on the hurricane track. We have to look at the cone, and the impacts could be larger. They get that. The bigger issue is communicating that sometimes to the public so that they take the proper actions.
Yeah, on our end, for the most part, we read their discussions and we discuss the forecast with the forecasters, and we pretty much give that information to emergency managers, and we answer their questions, and we give them all the information we have because we feel like we need them to have that to make the best decision. And like John was saying, they understand uncertainty, and they understand that we understand that they need this information days in advance. So we're giving them the best that we can. And we did just have our hurricane evacuation study wrap up. So we have that information in our pockets as well. So it's really just leaning on that relationship that we have with the Weather Service. And we really give everyone all the information that we can, and really just help them make the best decision and keep everyone safe, keeping in mind that we can't evacuate every time, or, you could have the wolf scenario, boy crying wolf, but we really just are out there to keep everybody safe.
And if I get to that too, I'll actually thank Hunter for reminding me, but we have back in my office, he's helping me out here, but the benefit is we're actually trying probabilities a little bit, and it's sometimes hard for the public to understand, but with hurricanes, for example, you can see the tropical storm force wind probabilities or the probabilities of hurricane force winds. And those numbers themselves may not mean a whole lot to some people, but you could see the trends. Are the trends increasing for a tropical storm or for hurricane force winds? That's a sign that maybe we need to be keeping a closer eye on the system. When it comes to winter weather, for example, this year, I believe all the offices serving South Carolina will be starting a new experiment using snowfall probabilities, and we'll be giving an expected snowfall amount, which is our typical forecast. And then we're also going to have two other forecasts. One will be a low end, one will be a high end, and it's using multiple ensemble members. And it looks at if 90% of the models, let me get that right. So for the high end, it's showing 90% of the models are showing amounts that high, and 10% are higher than that. And on the low end, only 10% of the models are going to be lower than what we're showing in that low end forecast. And what that really does is allows you to factor in the timing differences in a winter storm, or a shift in track of the low because of all the different model ensembles, how they get brought in. So I think it's just another way. It's not just giving you a forecast of 2 inches of snow, but we're saying, hey, the potential's there for 5 inches if the storm tracks a little farther east and the cold air makes it in here, for example. So I think we're really trying to find different ways and really find ways that work to convey uncertainty.
So you guys were talking about uncertainty. So let's say the event is certain to hit. John, you have that seat in South Carolina, and Diana, you're working in the EOC. What is it like the day of the operation, the day of the storm's hitting? What are your duties? What do you guys do to provide information, John, maybe to the governor, or Diana, what are you doing to provide information in the EOC?
Sure. Well, the day of is really chaotic, as you can probably imagine. We are probably gearing up for a press conference, and so we will give an in-face one-on-one briefing to the governor. We will tell him exactly what we're expecting, and we will convey those uncertainties that we were just talking about. We will create any kind of graphics that will aid in any kind of actions that the managers need to take. We will hold conference calls. We will call people directly. We will have our weather service conference calls where they're getting us more information or any updates or changes. And then we're having another call conveying that information even further. So a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of in-face briefings, and all kinds of communication, and just steadily watching the weather, what it's actually doing, and how it actually plays out.
Yeah, it's pretty similar in South Carolina when I'm there working at the state. It's a very busy day. I'll be honest with you, I don't have much time to actually look at the weather. I'm relying on the stuff I'm receiving from the Hurricane Center and coordinating with offices. So for example, my day will consist of getting in there. I'm on NWS chat with all the surrounding offices. In fact, we have a private chat room set up in South Carolina that we used to coordinate, and it's all the offices in the state are on there. The Hurricane Center has a coordinator for us. They're usually in that room. Regional headquarters is in there. If there's someone from the weather services at FEMA, they're in that room usually. So we have this big internal chat room going on where we're talking about messaging and what we think the main impacts will be. So there's a lot of that going on. I'm sometimes having conference calls on the side with the Hurricane Center, or talking to the storm surge unit about what we can expect. And then, of course, at the EOC itself, there's multiple briefings going on a day. We have calls with all the county emergency managers at least twice a day. As we get closer to the event, we're briefing the governor once or twice a day. And these briefings are sometimes an hour long each. We're providing briefings out into the Emergency Operations Center itself with all the emergency response team there. And that happens during every shift change, or sometimes even in the middle of a shift, to keep everyone updated. Trying to work with the PIO in the state to make sure we're messaging things properly, and we have a consistent message between the Weather Service and state emergency management. So it is pretty much going nonstop from the moment you walk in to the moment you leave. For me, it could be 12, 14, 16-hour days there doing that with very little time to actually look at the weather. Most of it's just coordinating and trying to make sure we have a good message to get out. And then, of course, the press conferences that I've participated in South Carolina have been a great opportunity to make sure we get a good message out to the public that's well coordinated between all the offices, and really kind of helps people know what's going to go on. So when the governor gives the order to evacuate, for example, people have a good feeling for what they can expect, and hopefully are more likely to take action.
So I want to segue just a moment here. We're getting closer to 9 o'clock, about 15 minutes left here. Let's talk a little bit about the hurricane plans you guys have talked about. Diana, you brought that up once or twice. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how, I know North Carolina kind of leads the way, maybe next to Florida, or maybe North Carolina leads the way. We'll say leads the way. We like Carolina leads the way on hurricane preparedness and stuff like that.
Right. So the hurricane evacuation study was a long time coming. They had a lot of meetings with the coastal counties, and with there was a lot of back and forth conversation about how they wanted to draw certain kind of boundaries. So basically it takes all kinds of so a few categories of, not necessarily just the categories of hurricanes, but kind of breaks them down into subcategories of an upper and a lower, and kind of it takes the areas on the coast and it gives us evacuation times, and say if we have a Cat 1 coming, it's going to take you X amount of time to evacuate this many people. And so it kind of gives you the amount of time that you need of a lead time to say, we need to evacuate these people now. We have this intensity of a storm coming our way. It's basically in a table form, and you can kind of pinpoint where it is. And we have maps of areas where we tell a group of people that they need to evacuate based on whichever type of storm we have coming our way. And it's like a 500-page document. It explains a whole bunch of stuff, but that's basically the gist of it.
How detailed are the surge maps that the state level gets? I know the ones that come out publicly from the Hurricane Center are more coarse or resolution. Do you guys get almost street level kind of mapping, or what's the resolution?
For us, we have our in-house FINA network, Flood Inundation Mapping Network, and we use that quite heavily, and we're able to see real-time gauge levels, and we can actually get a cross-sectional view, and we can see how we're expecting the inundation to happen. So that's a very, very good tool that we have in our pockets.
And John, for hurricane preparedness and hurricane preparations, now that we're almost wrapping up 2017, wrapping up the hurricane season, what are you guys doing, working with your partners to almost look ahead to the next season already, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. It really never stops for us. We work with the state. We're already trying to set up what the week will be next year for South Carolina Hurricane Awareness Week. The state meets to talk about their hurricane plan almost every couple of months, starting, I believe, in February. Again, we're going to start meeting and talking about the tropical plans and what needs to change. So there's constant meetings with all the county and state emergency managers, the Weather Service, to make sure we're on the same page. And then, of course, you have the public outreach aspect of things. We're trying to make sure the public's always aware of the threats as we head into the start of hurricane season. So it's really almost a year-long process for us. It really never stops. It's probably one of the bigger threats that the state faces as well. So we really take it seriously when it comes to making sure the plans are solid, that everyone's using, and that the public has the information they need when when we get into hurricane season to make good decisions.
And Diana, I assume the off season is kind of the busy planning time for you guys as well.
It is. When we don't have our meteorological hats on, we have our planning hats on, and we're preparing, and we're performing outreach and trying to just get everybody ready for some sort of hazard that's going to eventually head their way.
Better than a stupid hat, right?
Very much so.
Scotty, anything?
Yeah, I was wanting to, we were talking about preparing and stuff, but two storms come to mind that I think both of you guys had to really deal with, and obviously the 2015 flood in South Carolina from Charleston up to Columbia, and then Hurricane Matthew last year. Can both of you guys just kind of maybe take us back into what was going on that day for you guys, maybe just some personal memories and recollection of what your experiences were during those events?
For me, when you look back at the floods in October 2015, I was still lead forecaster down in the Charleston office, and that was probably one of the biggest events I've had to work in my career in the forecast office. We knew it was going to be a big event, and we were talking about it, historic and life-threatening flash flooding days in advance. But when you see models showing potential for 20, 25 inches of rain, it's just something we don't see, and we really don't know what the impacts of that are going to be because we haven't experienced that, and that makes it really difficult. How bad can this really get? And I remember working through that event, And the night going on, we just see this rain coming in, and we start getting frantic calls from our emergency managers talking about the flooding and needing swift water rescues and not being able to get to people. And that sticks with me. We lost our phone service. We were on cell phones trying to talk to our emergency managers and getting the flash flood emergencies out and trying to make sure we were keeping people updated on social media. And it's a great staff down there, and I was really proud to work with that group during that event because I really thought we did a great job. And I know in the Columbia office, they had the same thing going on, big impacts, dams failing all over the place, just loss of infrastructure. And it's a really stressful event. And in the Columbia office, they were short-staffed. Actually, my position, the person in my position previously actually retired and had to leave that night of the flooding at midnight. Is the way it worked. So they were really short-staffed and had people from other offices coming in to help. And, you know, for Matthew, to me, I think the biggest part of that was just the teamwork involved, the coordination, working with all the offices. You know, it was a big event for the state. We hadn't had something like that in a while. So just the feeling of pride for what the Weather Service was able to do and how well we worked, not only within the agency, but also with our partners.
Hey, John, real quick, I want to jump in here because you mentioned flash flood emergency. Is that something that's usually requested from emergency managers, or is that the product you guys are more deciding there at the office level?
More deciding at the office level. To be honest with you, though, I don't even know if a lot of our emergency managers even knew it existed, to be honest with you. We've never had to issue it before. It's nothing I've ever done in my career. So, you know, we just realized the magnitude of this event was larger than anyone's ever seen before. And if we're going to use it, it met all the criteria. Let's get something else. Let's try to heighten the awareness of how bad the situation was. So that's really what it came down to there. And we had a group discussion in the office. Do we go with one now? You know, you don't want to cry wolf, but we knew it was bad and we knew it was only going to get worse. So that's kind of how that decision came about.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Diana,
Sure.
Memories you had there?
Sure. So for the 2015 flood, that was largely a South Carolina event. We did send some crews for the EMAC, and we helped out there. But otherwise, we didn't. It wasn't a huge event in our respect. But Matthew certainly was. So leading up to the storm, you know, we have the days on of it's going to track here, it's going to track there, and it just wavered. And we really people kind of let their guard down in a sense that they thought we were in the clear, even though the forecast wasn't wrong. We were well within the forecast cone. And kind of like John was saying, that was a lot of rain that was forecast. And we really only had Floyd in our memories. That was still a good storm, but it was more than that. And so it was really just, you know, the chaos of all the briefings and trying to get people back into, hey, this is going to be a big deal. And at the end of the day, it really brought more light to having that cone, just not trying to convey that it's not an impact cone and that you need to be vigilant in any kind of forecasting updates that occur. And also it brought to light, you know, more the possibility of inland flooding and what the rivers can do with that rain. And not that storm surge isn't a big deal. I mean, obviously it is, but just the inland flooding has its place too. And we need to kind of take a look at that as well.
And Diana, while that was going on, October was a crazy.
Right.
October was crazy for North Carolina.
Absolutely.
Because on the east part of North Carolina, we had devastating flooding.
Right.
On the western part, the state was on fire. So how did you guys, how was you managing that? I mean, we were over here in the western part breathing in smoke for, you know, many days. I mean, that had to be just, you know, a trying time for your office.
Yes, a lot of coffee and Red Bull and a lot of anything else that would give you energy. Yeah, I think, you know, we were activated for a really long time, for weeks and weeks, probably felt like months for most. And, you know, we just sometimes activated for more than one thing at the same time. And we just really pulled together and worked together as a team and came out on the other side.
Yeah, it was just, you know, Ricky and I, we were watching it at the Speedway, and we went to, was it Lumberton, Ricky?
Yeah, we did, you know, what they tell us not to do. We went down there, we were flooded, we were down meteorologists, but other than that.
And then But then a couple of days later, you know, we were engulfed with wildfires, and I knew even Ricky and them experienced some smoke up there. But we do have
back to Greenville.
That's right. That's right. We do have a viewer question before we end up. Right quick, let me pull it up. This is from our friend Craig Cece, who watches us all the time. He says, a question for both of you guys. What event do you fear the most for your regions? Is it something like a repeat of Hurricane Hugo or Hazel, or is it something else that you really are maybe not fearful, but something that you kind of perks your interest as something that may cause some craziness in your jobs that you guys do?
Wow. Well, I guess for us, you know, we are natural hazards, but we also have to deal with the unforeseen kind of potential. So we actually activated for the pipeline disturbance and the disturbance in Charlotte last year. So I guess in my mind, at least maybe it's because of my position, but I feel like the natural disasters we can somewhat prepare for. But it could be those things that we don't see coming up, that disturbance in Charlotte that could have pretty heavy consequences kind of come up or be more large scale, or you know, possibly even a wildfire that came about and was more long term and larger scale.
How big are heat and cold events?
Well, we do broadcast those heat warnings and cool warnings. So we know about them and we extend those warnings. So I think that doesn't quite stick out in my mind as being something that would be the most worrisome. But yeah, we do extend those out to the public.
Gotcha. I know some of the Weather Service data over the years has shown, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, heat's one of the number one killers more than kind of floods and tornadoes. So I was curious if on a state level, that's something you guys, you know, almost have a bigger threat of, perhaps.
Yeah, I know. If you look at, we do have heat-related fatalities in the state, of course, but when you really look at the numbers, I think we find a larger concentration of those fatalities in some of the bigger cities. Philadelphia, Chicago, during these big heat waves that they have up there where people don't have air conditioning, big urban centers. So while it is a risk here, I think people are a little bit more acclimated to the heat. You know, it doesn't mean that it can't get bad around here, but I generally don't see that being our biggest threat, at least in South Carolina.
Just another sweltering day in the Carolinas.
Just get used to it. It's July or August in the South. You know, it is what it is sometimes, but.
What is it? They say Columbia is the hottest city in the world, you know, in the summertime.
It is. I actually think our science and operations officer, Frank Alsheimer, had taken a look, and if I remember correctly, I think he said Columbia actually is the hottest city east of the Mississippi. So I don't know if we like that honor or not, but it does get hot here. I could confirm that.
Famously hot.
Exactly. That's why we have the slogan. It's true. All
right, guys. Well, we'll end on this. One other thing, it seems like October in the Carolinas is always crazy. Matthew and then the 2015 flood. But briefly, if you guys have any stories, you know, this year with 2017 in October, we had to deal with tornadoes in South End, North Carolina. So how was that for you guys? Kind of dealing with those two. I don't know if I want to call it outbreak, but it's very unnormal for the Carolinas to have that many tornadoes. You know, anytime, but especially here in the month of October. So kind of talk to us briefly about what you guys experienced through that, and then we'll end the show.
For me, yeah, we fortunately in the Columbia area, we only had a couple of tornadoes back in October, maybe just one actually. I know the Greenville-Spartanburg office got hit really hard though in the upstate of South Carolina, and I was just talking to my counterpart, Tony Sturry, at a conference over the past couple of days, and they were just talking about, you know, just the number of tornadoes and all the surveys they had to do, and they had some tornadoes that crossed track, and just the difficulty of going out there and surveying. That's a lot of times the difficult part. Obviously, working the event's hard enough, and then we have to go out after the fact and go and look at all the damage and assess and determine the strength of the tornadoes. That's often difficult, and you know, I have to say we're not out of the woods, even though we're in this La Nina winter and it's calling for maybe warmer, slightly drier. a lot of times we find that we can get ice storms in La Nina winters, and we also get severe weather in La Nina winters, or maybe both going out at the same time. Ice in the upstate and severe weather in the lower part of the state. So it's something we're gonna have to keep an eye on, certainly throughout the winter, I think.
And Diana, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. For us, it was, it's just a much smaller time frame and scale. So we really just did our normal conveyance of the hazards and the impacts and the locations, and honed in on the western part of the state and the most recent events. And on a personal account, it was really interesting for me because I was able to kind of connect the Weather Service survey crew and an area coordinator, because he was the area coordinator for Hickory, and he wanted to go out and couple with the survey crew. And it was awesome part of my job to be able to do that and to connect someone who needed to help his population and get with the science side of the Weather Service. So
yeah, I can speak for one. I'm tired of damage surveys, so I'm good if we don't have any more for a while. So we'll end on that. I do want to give you guys the opportunity to promote maybe any social media or websites that you guys would like to promote for the folks of North and South Carolina. Diane, I'll start with you first.
Sure. Everywhere on Twitter and Facebook, we have North Carolina Emergency Management. We push any and all updates there. So about that.
All right. And John?
Sorry, I was unmuted. Yeah, for me, you can follow me at Quagliariello, which is Quagliariello. Not super active on Twitter, but I do follow things more. But actually, the best way to get information is through your local Weather Service office. So I highly suggest you follow your local office. Everyone works real hard to get good information out there on social media and keep people updated. There's other great sources out there, like Jared. But of course, all your local offices are working real hard. So follow us on Twitter, on Facebook. We do our best to update throughout the day, and especially during bigger events.
And if you didn't catch John's last name, it's on our Twitter account, Carolina Weather Group.
That's right. All right, well, guys, thank you for that. Stick around if you want to. We do Tweet of the Week, so if you want to stick around for that or even participate, you are more than happy to do that. But I'll toss it over to our panelists. Anybody have theirs pulled up yet? Or
Hey, that's the thing I forgot to get. Give me a moment.
All right, James. Go ahead, James. James, you stole mine. No, go ahead. I've got a backup. Go ahead. Well, no, it's okay. It was one of mine, but I've got a backup, so go ahead. Way to go, Jared. Way to go. It's your fault, man. No, it's okay. It's all right. All right, let's go to Ricky. Ricky. You're presenting, so go ahead.
There we go. I had to unmute the mic. I thought it was a neat tweet earlier. It's from UCAR News. They had a little weather thing going on Twitter today, a little presentation they were given, and this really just shows how the hurricane's track can have a significant impact on the storm surge totals and the overall impact you eventually get. Something we see often here in North Carolina, even with the Outer Banks versus Sound Side or Oceanside flooding. Same kind of deal here with Irma. Look at the track that it took and what the surge would have been if it had taken a slightly different track and how much higher that surge would have been there in that right front quadrant up and towards the Naples area and portions of the Southwest Florida coastline. So interesting tweet, I thought. And if you've never downloaded the slosh model, download it, play around with it a little bit. It's interesting to see how much your city will be destroyed depending on the storm strength. Across Hampton Roads especially, I've looked at it, and some of the weirdest surges actually come from a paralleling storm off the coast because of how the Chesapeake Bay works with us in coastal Virginia. So neat stuff.
All righty, let's go to Jared. Jared?
So in order to avoid the potential for anybody to take my tweet of the week, I have an account of the week. The National Weather Service Operations Proving Ground is holding a Go 16 workshop. This is Go 16 is going to start its drift to operational Goes East at the end of the month on the 30th. So lots of great information. If you have any interest in satellite meteorology or just want to stare at awesome AWIPS 4 panels, this is just browse at NWS OPG and use the hashtag Go16 workshop. Just some phenomenal information being shared out of there. They have YouTube streams and all sorts of really good stuff to check out. So highly geeky, highly wonderful. It was a great way to spend my lunch break, and definitely recommend it.
Cool stuff. Well, let me share mine right quick. Okay, can you guys see mine? Yes.
Yes.
All right, so this is from the Capital Weather Gang. This is kind of just a time lapse of the wildfire and tropical season. This is just a short little component of it. You can see my Twitter page, or we'll tweet it out from the Carolina Weather Group. You can visit the entire the website and look at the entire thing. But pretty cool. It shows you the smoke from the wildfires out west and some of the dust coming off of Africa, and even the tropical systems as they go into the coastline. So that is my tweet of the week. And stop sharing. And Diana or John, you guys have one? I don't want to leave you out if you do.
I do not.
Yeah,
right.
I have one. Let me share my screen here. All right, this is a plug from our office, and technically it's like 7 days old, but I'm still going to use it because this is pretty cool. We had one of our cooperative weather observers get an award last week, providing 55 years of service of observations to us every day for 55 years, and her family's been sending in observations since 1893. So as much as we appreciate our storm spotters, this is true dedication for family to be and not only helping the Weather Service, but the whole community in establishing a good climate record. It's just really incredible. So I just wanted to send a thanks there to Mrs. Giroux for all of her work, and it's just pretty incredible to see something like that.
I saw your office tweet about that last week, and I thought that was really cool. So very neat. All right, guys. Well, thank you again, Diana and John, for joining us. Maybe we can get you guys back on the show at some point. I do want to say next week's show, Ricky, how are we looking for Jamie?
I will let you know when I check in with him in about 20 minutes when I send him a text.
Okay, so we may have Jamie Morrow on next week. I think he's moving to the Raleigh office, correct?
He's switching offices. He's moving to Raleigh from the Blacksburg office. So
yes,
he told me he'd be on as long as he could get internet set up at his apartment. So I haven't heard the status on that yet, but I'll check in with him. All
right, so we may have Jamie on, or you may just hear us talking. So after that, though, we do have kind of a big list. Jim Cantori will join us on the 29th of November, recapping the 2017 tropical season. And then on December the 6th, we have Tom Johnstone and Jeff Evans. Both are weather service office in Houston and Corpus Christi. They will be joining us, kind of talk about the before and during and after Hurricane Harvey as we kind of dive into Hurricane Harvey. And then after that, we have Ashley Morris, emergency management officer, or I'm not sure what her title is. I don't want to say officer, but she works in the emergency management office out of Harrison County, Texas. And then as we wrap up 2017, Marshall Shepard will join us for a recap of the 2017 weather season. It's Marshall's annual appearance on our show, so we're excited to have him. And that's it for the rest of the year. So Just a few more shows before we close out 2017, and we are already working on 2018 schedule. So looking forward to that. So for everyone watching the Carolina Weather Group, we appreciate it. Share the word. Share our Twitter account and our Facebook account. Make sure you download us on Apple or your Google Play Store. And you guys stay warm out there this weekend as the cool blast comes in, and we will see you next Wednesday night here on the